welcome to the inaugural mission here, right? The first Starship Rift Arcade Podcast. And we're so happy you're here, either watching on YouTube or listening on where were they listening on, Mike?
Well, let's see. By the time we get through with this, it'll be on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast.
Oh, fantastic. So thank God Mike knows about all those things, because I certainly don't. So here we have today the three of us who love arcade machines and arcades that you would go and play these machines.
Love them.
Who are you, my young friend here?
I am Roman, local patron here, but more than that, a longtime arcade goer, very into the arcade scene, love everything about them, and just love to see this place grow.
Oh, fantastic. And to my left,
I am Mike Murray. I am the owner of the Geek Pub, which is an arcade parts supplier and plans and things like that, as well as the future owner of part owner of the Time Rift Arcade.
And there you go. I'm part owner of the Time Rift Arcade, believe it or not. And I'm the owner and operator of the Electric Starship Arcade. If you've seen me on YouTube, which is probably like 3 of you, or if you've seen me here sweeping and mopping the floor. But yes, this is our trio of hosts for the Starship Rift Arcade Podcast. And today, I think we should start out by talking about what an arcade is.
I love it.
What is an arcade, folks at home? What is an arcade? Roman, to you, how would you define an arcade?
You know, I think that if you think of arcade, most people say, oh, it's a place where you go play video games. But it's more than just video games, in my opinion.
That's a good answer.
One of the things that you do is when you're going to an arcade, from when I was younger to now, you're going to spend time with friends. You're spending time with family. It's a meeting spot. It's just not, hey, let's go play games. It's let's have a good time as a family together. Let's go out there and hang out as friends. Let's do something different and go on an adventure. Each arcade is a different adventure.
So I think we found our new marketing guy.
Yeah, I'm done. My answer was garbage compared to that. That was a fantastic answer. Yeah. We literally, Roman had no prep for this, but that was the best answer ever. Mike Murray, what is an arcade to you, my friend?
Well, an arcade is this big open area. Sometimes it has a big archway over the top. I'm just kidding.
Webster's Dictionary. Hold on, I got that right here. A covered passageway with arches along one side or both sides. But in short, an indoor area containing coin-operated machines.
Yeah.
Somewhat. Yeah. Sometimes they're not coin-operated. But.
Yeah. So for me, no, in all seriousness, the joking aside, the dictionary definition
I liked it. I liked it.
It's any place that has games that any genre, no, sorry, not genre, any age of person can go play. So, you know, when I think about going into a Chuck E. Cheese or an arcade bar, or, you know, like whether it's at a kid-friendly place or an adult-only or whatever, if it has games, it's an arcade. That's my opinion.
I like that. That's a really good definition as well, my friend. So, and that kind of segues right into talking about these different kinds of arcades, because you mentioned a few, right? And so... by all means, I am no expert and couldn't have put together a list of all the different kinds of arcades. And if I miss some when I talk about this, something you consider an arcade, you two chime in and tell me what's up.
Yeah.
But also, any of you listen at home, go into comments of whatever way you're listening to this and let us know what we missed. But let me start with what I consider small is my category. So a small arcade, and this could be anything. This could be an arcade that's in a convenience store in the past, possibly the small arcade in a movie theater that you go to and play. Any other examples you can think of?
Don't forget laundromats.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're getting into some spatial things that it makes it an arcade or not. Because does 2 arcade games in a laundromat make an arcade, or does it have to be a little cove cut out for the games to make it an arcade?
That's a great question. I mean, it's almost the same question as what makes a restaurant. You know, like a food truck.
Right. The bathroom, right? The restroom makes a restaurant. But yeah, that's one of those things that's up for debate, or it's completely subject to, when you look at things. I remember there was an ice cream shop when I was a kid, and it was a 50s ice cream shop, but it was in the 80s, so it was retro and things that we consider retro now, Anyway, but inside of it, it was like a soda shop where you get malts and shakes and that sort of thing. But it also had a little boxed out area with shades that had windows, but the shades were down, and you opened a door, and inside it had a row of basically 8 games, and it had its own arcade. And I believe it said arcade above the door. No mistake that was an arcade within a small place. So,
well, about a month ago, I was actually in Montreal, in Canada, and coming back at the airport, they had a Pac-Man and a Galaga real old CRT arcade game set on free play in the middle of the walk aisle, and people would just stop and play arcade games. Very interesting.
So, but that wasn't an arcade, right? You wouldn't view that as an arcade.
That as arcade, but if you think about spatial, and you're thinking about a convenience store that only has a couple, people used to go to convenience stores to play that.
Does it have a cove though? Does it have to have like 3 walls?
But if you want to have the cove, I know everybody remembers CC's Pizza's arcade.
Oh, totally. See, that's an arcade within a pizza place, right?
When that was one of the first places that actually had Mortal Kombat 1.
Oh, me too.
And we used to go to CC's to get pizza and play that, specifically to play that.
What CC's did you go to?
That was the one in Forest Hill.
Okay.
And Fort Worth, Texas.
I just didn't know if we frequented the same CC's. Mine had a Mortal Kombat as well.
Okay, so the funny thing is, Mike and I talk about this all the time. It's like the CC's that was near me had no games. At least that I remember.
You had the worst CC's ever.
Oh my God. You missed out.
A CC's with no games is really, really odd. So
when I was a kid, I was probably, I'm going to say somewhere between 10 and like 13. There was a place called a Dairy Twin.
Oh yeah,
it was
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and it was right next door to Dairy Queen, which
wow, I have not heard of that.
Yeah, which made the Dairy Twin.
Like Dunkin' and Starbucks on the street out there.
But anyway, I always wanted to go there. My brother always wanted to go there, and that was because in the back was a little room, and there couldn't have been more than, hang on, I can count them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 arcade machines, and it's 3 stand-ups and 2 cocktails, and Xevious. Oh, that's where I played
Xevious.
For the first time.
That's a great game.
But we always called that, we want to go to...
Repetitive soundtrack, though. Get into that. It's a whole other episode, folks, right there.
Yeah. We always wanted to go there because they had an arcade, and we called it an arcade, and it only had 5 games.
So now we're getting into a numerical thing. So first thing I want to clarify before we get into all these categories is, when did an arcade start to you guys, or to anyone listening at home there? When do we consider the first arcade? So are we saying arcades are really, or are we just talking about arcades for the, I don't know, modern time, like from the 80s forward? Because are we talking about arcades when there was just pinball machines around in the 20s and the 30s? Or are we talking about...
I mean, that's true because
or penny arcades or Nickelodeons?
The gambling machines,
correct.
Right? Like those aren't arcades?
No. That's a casino.
Yeah.
Right now we're talking about what makes a casino.
But based off of the Webster's definition, didn't it say coin-operated machine?
It does say off of, I mean, I don't know if it's Mr. Webster that put that definition out, but Mr. Google certainly did. But yes, it does say coin-operated machines. But now, if you have a free-to-play format or a pay-to-play format that everything's set to free, they're not technically coin-operated machines, folks. Correct. So this is not an arcade that we're sitting in right now here in Starship Theater.
Wow.
Wow, this is quantum. We've just teleported a whole nother place. So so let's start our definition from the Nolan Bushnell brainchild-esque time, and I'm not giving him full credit for making arcades, but he certainly put together a Chuck E. Cheese and said, hey, I'm going to make a place where I'm
tell people who Nolan Bushnell is.
Oh my gosh, I gotta paint a picture of Nolan Bushnell here. So we're talking early 70s. He was involved with Computer Space and Pong and Atari. And I believe the way the story went, and you can certainly correct me in the comments on this one or either one of you guys, is you make an arcade machine and you make $5 selling it. Well, that's a very arbitrary number there. And then you see the operator turn around and make thousands of dollars on it in change, and you think, I'm on the wrong end of this. I need to get on the end where I'm getting the change out of the machine, not just selling the machine once. I need to sell the game multiple times over and over.
Right.
So how does he do that? And he creates a place like Chuck E. Cheese where he can have all the games in one place, and he's getting the continuous money instead of the one sell. So, and then I believe he saw a pipe organ thing. I don't know if this was a thing in the 70s where you'd go and eat food and someone would play on an organ. And that's how.
I've never heard of this.
Right? That's fun. And that's how he's like,
time.
and then he sees like the tiki place at Walt Disney World and goes, animatronics and Chuck E. Cheese. So that's a very short, I didn't want to take the whole time. No, the Chuck E. Cheese podcast will be on the 4th episode, I guess. So, but anyway, and that to me is the beginnings of arcades as we like them and know them, not so much as far back as
I did see some interesting stuff on the internet a couple of weeks ago when I was reading about some arcades, and it was really about Taito. And they were one of the original arcade makers in the back, and they had the same thing happen, was that they saw that they were making a lot more money on the playing side than they were on the selling side, and they started opening up more arcades throughout I think throughout Europe. It wasn't just in Japan, because they weren't even a Japanese company. They were
oh, is that right?
Yeah, they weren't out of Japan. I cannot remember where it was from, but it's they were right outside of that, and they started selling to Japan.
So you bring up a really great point with Taito or Tato. You want to talk about some arguments. We should just write down, you want a future podcast? We'll just write down a list of all the games that we argue and how to pronounce them. So Taito, Tato, however you like it, and y'all can certainly phonetically spell that one out later. But in Japan, I believe Space Invaders had arcades that were just Space Invaders, and there was a shortage on the yen because of it.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
So anyway. Another story for another time. So, but so we've defined it. We're going to say that like this late 70s forward is the arcades we're talking about. And we've talked about small arcades, and those could be anything from, like I said, the arcade in a hotel to even a small operator. And, we have examples of small operators, and this is typically a small operator is not going to, they may sell a snack, but they're not going to sell alcohol, certainly. And they're definitely not going to sell much food, if anything, other than maybe, again, chips and a soda or something like that. So.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing that I'd like to kind of almost a little bit sum up what you just that whole thing.
Sorry.
Right. No. Language evolves, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The thing that we call an arcade has been evolving.
I like
and
that.
It's continuing to evolve, right? And
for sure.
That's going to actually segue into what we're going to talk about pretty soon. But yeah, so arcade was a giant arch that people stood under and now it's something completely different.
Well, that would bring us to, we were talking about small arcades, and we would go into what I feel is the next level of the modern arcade, and that's going to be the arcade with a drink, right? Or a barcade, a token tavern, if you want to go with the... if you want to go with the current documentary that's out, which is good. It's
Mike's over here trying to unlock his laptop.
Where would you
failing miserably?
I suck. Sorry,
where do you think the mall arcade would fit in? Is that still small? Because some of those were really massive, but they didn't sell the alcohol. So is there a half, a 0.5?
I would say that a mall. Okay, so now we're getting into that whole spatial thing again.
Right.
I would say a mall arcade that is like the Tilt that I worked in, that took one little spot that could easily be a clothing store or a CD warehouse or something back in the day, a tape store, Tape World. That's a small arcade. And so now we're getting into that numerical part of it, right? So is it 50 games? Is it 25 games? Where is it a giant arcade? What makes it? Now, if you're comparing round one, you have skipped several levels here of arcade. Yes. So what do you think?
I think that, some of the arcades were bigger. They had a lot more space. I remember one at used to be Town Center Mall in Fort Worth that actually had a very, very large arcade in the bottom.
What was that one called?
I cannot remember, to be honest with you. I just remember that's where we'd give us a roll of quarters and we'd stay in there for a few hours and play games. It was the first time I saw the hologram game for the first time there.
Oh, Time Traveler or Holocene?
Yeah, Time Traveler. The first time I ever saw that one. There, ate up many of my quarters playing that.
Yeah.
But then, think about like your putt-putt. And I know we talked about Chuck E. Cheese.
Ooh,
but
I totally left putt-putt out.
Yeah, putt-putt is a very big arcade.
That's
and they
a big arcade.
And but they didn't serve alcohol there. and then you have your Mount Asia.
No, they did.
Well, when I went there, they didn't serve alcohol.
No. So it's funny. It's this is a really, I'm so glad you brought that up. So putt-putt, you could, if you were playing the golf in the golf side on the outdoor area, at least the one by my house, they served beer for the people who were playing putt-putt outside, but they did not serve beer on the inside where you were
served ice cream.
Interesting. I've never saw that at any of the two that I worked at.
Yeah.
They served mint chocolate chip ice cream, if I remember correctly.
It had many flavors. Funny story. They used to,
or maybe it was just a rogue putt-putt that I
when they used to get down
Dirty
low on the
putt-putt.
ice cream, they would switch out the containers, and they would just tell the employees, "Hey, y'all could eat the rest of this." And you'd see like 6 or 7 kids just eating out of an ice cream container.
Oh, wow.
Great stuff.
They had a little stain on their shirt with ice cream drippings. It's nice. Well, we're taking you back, folks. We're painting a picture here. So the other, you'd mentioned putt-putt, and I'll have to mention another one that was a fantastic arcade around here, and that was Malibu Grand Prix.
So just to clarify, around here is Dallas.
Oh, yeah. We are in Dallas, Fort Worth area. This would be Fort Worth. Richland Hills or North Richland Hills, so just in that DFW area for sure. So, and that's where most of my arcade experience is going to be from. Or have any of you lived out of town further than that?
Nope.
Well, we're going to have a really small perspective of arcades, but it is a rich history in this area, I promise. So,
it really is, and it still is today.
it is. I don't like to overstate things that I have no idea about, but it feels certainly like this is a arcade thick area, right? Like there's a lot of arcades around. In perspective, not as many as back in the 80s, but definitely from the next level up, which is what we'd be talking about, is that arcade with a drink, right? Like the arcade that's going to serve you a beer or maybe a cocktail or something of that nature. So those, we do have some great ones in the area. And, obviously we serve beer here at the Electric Starship Arcade, or maybe not so obviously, but now you know, if you didn't before. And so let's talk about those a little bit. When does the first one you remember seeing, or who do you remember doing that first? At least in our area. Barcadia.
Barcadia, yeah.
Yeah.
So Barcadia is going to be mine, but I think it's called Barcadia if I'm not mistaken, but I was actually in Chicago about 10 years ago. We got together and someone in the group said, "Hey, you want to go play video games?" And half the group said, "No, we want to go drink." He's like, "Okay, what do you want to play video games and drink?" Woohoo! And we're like, we're like,
what?
Yeah, we're like, what?
That's a thing?
We don't understand what you're saying. Can we take alcohol now? I said, "No, there's a bar that has arcade games." That was actually the pinnacle of me seeing this and saying, wow, this is multiple levels.
Yeah.
They had games everywhere. We're walking through the streets in Chicago in the snow to get to this place. And I got there and it was the best time I had in a while. But it was also obviously pre-COVID. This is people shoulder to shoulder. You're playing games and getting bumped around.
Oh, totally, yeah.
But you know what? It made it fun. And
I agree.
When this probably segues to something different, but when you're into someone that's actually catering towards an adult, it's still an arcade, but you don't see a lot of little kids in a place that serves that much alcohol. This was more of a bar with arcades and not an arcade that had a bar. I think there's a difference between those two.
There totally is. There's a bar, and there's an arcade up north, and I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but they actually charge more for children. So it's like $10 for adult and $15 or $16 for kids, because they really don't need them in there and tearing stuff up. So that's definitely a thing. So, and there's what's the arcade over in Dallas that they don't even open up till 3 or 5, and they don't have children there. Matter of fact, you have to be over 21 to go in, I believe.
Yeah.
Flashbacks?
Flashbacks, yeah.
Flashbacks.
So they changed their name, though. Round 2.
Round 2?
Round 2.
Okay. Perfect. But yeah, there are arcades that are solely targeted toward adults. This arcade is not like that. We throw birthday parties, and we have children in here until 8 o'clock, and then we go to 21 and up, which is very standard, at least in our area, to have a time where it's adults only.
Yeah.
I actually like that. I love the fact that there's a split, because there's times where you're going to want to bring your family, but there's times where you just want to hang out with your friends too.
Absolutely.
And language can get kind of colorful when you're playing Street Fighter Third Strike. And
oh my gosh,
absolutely.
You should talk to the owner of this place.
Yeah, that guy.
A really colorful guy. My church isn't watching right now.
Oh no! Oh no! We'll edit that.
Sorry, no, it's fine. I'm very honest.
There was I went to Wichita Falls this last weekend, and it was for a party for my wife's family reunion. And I wanted to, and I did not get to go. There's a arcade bar there called the Maniac Mansion.
Oh yeah,
and
Marcus's
Marcus's place. And I wanted so bad to go.
I want to go there too.
Make a special trip because
let's do it. Yeah, we're gonna go. We're gonna film it.
But the thing I found interesting about it is that they don't open until 6 p.m.
Good for them.
So,
amen, brother.
They're open like 6.
I'm with them. Don't give me any ideas.
Is their repair cost way low?
Oh, for real.
So I think they're open like 6 to 2 or something like that.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So
yeah, that makes sense. People like to go hang out after work, so.
Absolutely. When I was making this place, I wanted it to be for everyone, and sometimes everyone doesn't want to be around everyone. So it gives specific times for adults and for children to have a blast.
Well, it's funny you say that because I have told this business model to many friends of mine because they ask me, what am I doing since I'm going to hold out some air quotes here for those who are just listening.
Air quotes.
When I, quote, retired from the IT world.
I like that.
And I tell them I'm opening an arcade bar. And they say, are you going to let kids in there? And I'm like, yeah, it's an arcade. We want to have it be family friendly. And some people are like, oh, that's so amazing. That's so awesome. And some people say, oh, do you really want alcohol around kids? So there's a lot of people who have differing opinions on that.
Some people don't know this, but they serve beer at Chuck E. Cheese, and they have since at least the 90s when I worked there. So, and they have fights break out, and we never have fights here. So it's fantastic.
I think that alcohol is just one of those weird things because every restaurant I've ever been to has alcohol in it.
Absolutely.
Most of them are there, and people are in there with their families. They're eating, and most of the time
that's such a good point.
Everyone drinking with their kids at the table too. It's not like they're like, oh, I got my kids, I can't drink. So it's. Yeah. I don't see a thing wrong with that.
So that's I'm really glad you said it just like that. That's actually perfect because I think it's the word bar. Has the connotation to it, right? So are we really, let's think about that for a second. Are we really an arcade bar? Would you call the Electric Starship a bar?
I would say it's an arcade that has a bar.
I agree. 100% agree. I think that there's a big difference because there's going to be, if you go somewhere where they have a bar set up with 50 stools around it, tables everywhere, that's catering towards someone sitting.
Yeah, and they don't open until 6 o'clock, and you can't get in unless you're 21.
Right.
There you go. That's a bar.
But if you're serving a drink, it doesn't automatically make you a bar just because you serve a drink.
So something you hear from places that don't necessarily have a bar is that they're family friendly and you're not. And I would say that's
bogus.
That's not true.
Use the word bogus.
Bogus is so nice.
I would say, have you ever been to a kid's birthday party that has adults there with it?
I mean, I always go back to Chuck E. Cheese because that gets into a whole nother category, which I call, obviously it's a family entertainment center, but I call it a kid-centric one. Right. And it has beer. And I even remember working there. I went to the manager. I'm like, should we serve beer? I mean, people are probably trying to drink beer to try to drown out all the noise and screams and everything. And then they're going to drive the kids home. They're like, the owners of Chuck E. Cheese like beer with their pizza. And I went, okay, I'll go back to work on my coin mechs that are jamming up full of pizza, pepperonis and whatnot. Well, let's talk about something else that's with the barcade that you just kind of get. All right. And that's the retro game. So if you had to classify all the different arcades with beer and wine and cocktails that have opened up in the last 10 or so years, the common theme of those is they're finding older games from the 80s and 90s because they're trying to build that nostalgic feel that when you walk in, the first thing you say is, wow, I haven't seen that game forever. I can't wait to play it. What I'm getting at with that is, do you think it's good to have just those retro games, or do you think you should have some more modern game mixed in as well?
I think it depends on what you're trying to build.
Okay.
If you are literally trying to build a, quote, arcade bar,
sure,
I'm not sure that it matters that much if the primary goal is to have people come in and drink. And you're going to make most of your money off of alcohol sales. And another reason why is because I think people go to a place like that for the vibe.
Totally.
They want to just be in a cool place and hang out with cool decor and all that around them. And the arcades become part of the decor.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
I don't think if you want to cast a broader net and you're looking for families and all of that, that you can get away with just one little genre of type of arcade, whether it's classic or modern or pinball or whatever it is. I think you have to have a bit of a mix of everything to draw in that modern family crowd, right?
I like that. And that's very interesting. Roman, what do you feel about
Well, I was about to chime in on that. You know, you make a good point about an arcade bar, but is it a bar arcade? So I think that's the big thing, because like you were saying, if you're going to be a bar that has a few arcade games, you know it's going to be 21 or older. You're going to get that older stuff that's specifically for that group.
Right.
But if
so
you want to
have Barcadia was kind of based on that. They didn't have a lot of, at least when I went, and guys, I haven't been there in a long time, but I fell in love with the whole concept based on Barcadia in Dallas.
Right. So. But in the second part, if you want a true arcade that serves alcohol or beer, whatever, well, you're going to want everything. So I don't think you should limit yourself down to 70 or 80s unless you're specifically going for, I want a retro arcade.
Sure.
But if you think about it, almost everything is retro right about now.
But boy, you ain't lying. Boy, it is. I'm so old, everything is retro. I agree with you.
I mean, where's the line at? Is it 10 years? Is it 5 years? What are you consider
great
retro?
point. That's a great point.
Yeah, and also think about when you talk about alcohol, right? Like you can even specialize in that. Like for example, like 2 streets up here, they're building a margarita bar. Like that's all they sell is margaritas.
Nice.
You know, so
well, I know where I'll be hanging out.
You can make all of these different things we were talking about, skinny or wide.
Sure.
Upon,
right. You know, I think that it just complements everything that's in the bar. Eventually, you'd like to have a one-stop shop where you can go and have fun and not have to worry about going somewhere else afterwards.
Agreed.
And that's a nice part. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question is, should you have food?
I have an opinion on that, but I'm going to save it.
Well, let's hear. It's time. We're going to hear it. Roman, what do you think?
So this is easy for me. So I think every arcade should serve hot dogs. That's just my opinion.
Yes.
I don't
Roman.
I don't think you could have an arcade
Your
without
check
hot dogs.
is in the mail, Roman. Check is in the mail.
You know, hot dogs and nachos are
what
I grew up with.
Oh my God.
Every arcade. And
let's go.
Think about this. Shout out to Putt Putt back in the day when they had their $5 Sunday special. You'd get a hot dog, a drink, and tokens, and one ride on there for $5. And it was
let's go.
Yeah, and
dude,
it was,
I want to go now.
Yeah. I had totally forgotten.
I'll pay $25 for that right now.
You get a go-kart ride, a hot dog, a drink, and you'd play some video games for $5. And those are those things that I look for, because that's the value, and that's like, hey, I could have fun for a couple of hours. It's not going to cost me an arm and a leg.
I love it.
And kids loved it. There was a busy time in the day wherever that happened. And it was just
I guess
great.
we're getting a hot dog roller for the timer.
You gotta have.
You can have my old one. I'm about to get a new one. How about you, Mike? What do you think?
I feel like, well, should we talk also about the legalities? I think we should. So I'll hit
slam
on
it in there really quick.
Yeah, I'll hit on it real briefly. So I do believe, thank you, I do believe that an arcade needs to have food. And I'll tell you why I think that.
Sure.
I think because a lot of times me and my family, we're talking about, hey, let's go to dinner. And we go to dinner all the time. I mean, that's just kind of one of the things that we do, right? And so, hey, let's go out to dinner. We need to pick a place that has a broad enough food choice that everybody's kind of happy. And I think if a place is just a bar, then we're not going to go there, right? Because it's like, well, I don't want to get nachos for dinner. And my wife's going to want a salad. And the kid doesn't like jalapenos or whatever. I'm just making something up, right? Picky kid. Right. So I think you got to cast a little bit of a broader net if you want to get that dinner crowd to come in and stay and play games and drink beer. If all you're targeting is, hey, play video games and drink beer, they're going to come after that, which may be okay. It may be okay.
Yeah, I think that it was something, to be honest, I think hot dogs and nachos simple was more than just giving someone food. I honestly think that it kept people in your place longer so they didn't have to leave to go.
That's exactly my point.
Right. And, and that's why I like the hot dogs. And the reason I like the hot dogs the best, because it's in the bun and you're not getting your hands dirty. So you're eating it. And then you go back and you're not.
God.
Less grease on your controls.
I have to tell a story.
Oh, my God.
We built this Mortal Kombat machine. If you guys have not seen the video, you got to watch it.
Yeah, it's
very
neat.
awesome machine.
It's pretty awesome.
There was a kid here the other day that had a chili cheese dog, and it was in the boat.
Put it in the cup holder?
He took it out. He took it out, and he put the thing, like the basket, what do we call that? Little
boat. You had it right. Yeah.
Put the boat down. And then he was eating the chili cheese dog, and then he just sat that down on the control panel.
Perfect.
And while he was playing, and he would just pick it up and eat from it.
That's ridiculous. You know, the most ridiculous one I saw that just weirded me out was we sell like the big pickle here. They just like bite the big pickle and lay it on the control panel.
Oh my gosh.
Like use the start button to like leverage it so it doesn't roll off on the floor.
Like they used to do cigarettes.
Yeah, it's like, but it's a giant pickle and then just a bite out of it and just like control panel, bang. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that was the.
I swear if it rolled off, he would have picked it up off the floor.
That's what happened at Puppet. You know, people had nachos. They walked around, ate them, licked their fingers playing games. Licked their fingers playing games.
Yes.
I just, you know, I guess that's why, you know, some people built up some really good immunities back in the day.
Yeah, that's right.
Now let me
for the strong back in the 80s.
Let me cover the legality thing about it. So, if you only want to serve beer and wine, in Texas anyway, this is probably wildly different in other states where they don't have restrictive alcohol laws. But if you want to serve beer and wine in Texas and you don't want to pay the $5,000 deposit to the state of Texas, it's a bond, I think. Pay that bond to the state of Texas. Then you have to serve food, and so that's why I think a lot of
you have to serve meals.
Meals, yes,
meals. Very technical. A hot dog is a meal. A nacho for $7 is not a meal.
Not a meal.
A weenie and a bun is a meal, no matter how small. Don't have any envy there, folks. It doesn't matter how big your hot dog is. As long as you have 8 of them on your menu, you can have beer, at least in this area.
Yeah.
So just my input on food, I view it as like I view going to a game or going to the movies. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to the movie that has the table and you can order the big meal like a movie dine-in movie place. And I think there's nothing wrong with arcades that have a dine-in centric movie that kind of experience. I shouldn't say movie, but just a full dining experience. Yeah. I personally haven't eaten at an arcade that I went, oh my gosh, the food here blows me away. I'll tell you what, Cidercade's artesian pizzas are pretty good. The one in downtown Fort Worth that has some good pizza.
Love that Cidercade pizza.
So, but I view food at an arcade as food at an arcade. You're gonna have a really hard time like saying, hey, I'm gonna go to the arcade and eat some food. You know, I was like, you just get something because you're hungry there. It does keep them there a lot, like feeding people at a football game on a Friday night keeps them there instead of them leaving early. So, you know, or a movie theater or anything like that. Yeah. To me, popcorn, hot dog, nacho, you kind of got it covered as far as the way I view it. But not to knock anyone that does a bigger menu. And also, I think if you serve cocktails, you may want to have a bigger menu just to soak up a little bit of that alcohol. Yep. So,
well, I guess the question would be now, if you have a huge menu and you have so many tables, are you now a restaurant that has an arcade?
Dave & Buster's.
Or are you now?
You're getting into the FEC, Family Entertainment Center section portion of this.
Where's the limit on that, on what the classification is? You know.
So we've talked a little bit about barcades. One last thing I want to talk about is how many pinball machines do you know? 2 things I want to talk about. What makes a retro arcade, barcade? I don't care if you're serving beer or not. What games do you have to have? Like you walk in and you're like, you mean you don't have
Pac-Man?
Pac-Man? What kind of place calls herself an arcade without a Pac-Man?
Yeah, should I just start naming a few out?
Yeah, please tell
Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Galaga. I think you really probably should have
Joust.
A Spy Hunter and a Joust and a Robotron.
Spy Hunter's tough to get, guys.
I know.
Robotron's tough to get, guys. I won't knock your arcade if you're missing Spy Hunter or a Robotron, but you know, try to get it. Obviously,
but that
Space Invaders,
Galaga, Space Invaders,
buddy.
Pac-Man,
I think Pac-Man, Galaga, that combo, and if you have a Miss Pac-Man, you may be able to go without a Pac-Man or vice versa. But man, if you don't have a Galaga, well, it's hard to call yourself an arcade. Even
if you go to the laundromat, they have a Pac-Man.
That's where I used to play. Galaga was at the laundromat.
Where you have those. Those are like the ones everyone had.
Yeah, if Pizza Hut was able to have a Galaga and a Pac-Man, you should be able to have a Galaga, or Pizza Inn or whatever, that you should be able to have a Galaga and a Pac-Man. So look for those first. If you're opening a retro arcade, make sure you have Galaga or Pac-Man, because if you don't have them, people are going to ask where they're at.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
and they ask where they're at when you do have them. I don't know, like probably 6 versions of Pac-Man on the floor at some degree. You know, between Battle Royale and Miss Pac-Man and I don't have Pac-Man Junior, but Baby Pac, the little hybrid pinball Pac-Man.
And then you've got the how it's like the little home use one. I can't think of
Oh, one-ups, arcade one-ups?
No, this is not an arcade one.
Oh, you're the cabaret cabinets?
It's
Cabaret.
Yeah.
Cabaret cabinet.
Okay.
Yeah. And then cocktail.
Yeah.
Cocktail, cabaret, or full size.
There you go.
So.
No, I saw the one you have.
Oh.
You have the little multicade thing that's a Pac-Man?
Is it the
Here?
baby pinball?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, Pac-Man like Pixel Party.
Pixel Party.
Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah. Well, I haven't had on the floor in a while. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That one's like a modern multicade, and it is the cabaret version of that.
Yeah.
We actually have that in our local movie theater still too. It's Pixel Party, and I wanted to say it was called something else before it was called Pixel Party, but anyway, Arcade Party, whatever, the Pac-Man one. Absolutely, I know exactly what you're talking about now. Yeah. Sorry for us to look at you like you had 3 heads there for just a second. So what about pinball, guys? Pinball is on the rise, man. Like, people love pinball, and that's one of the busiest areas in our arcade. How many pinball machines do you remember in your old arcades that you went to as kids? How many did they have, and then how many do you have now?
So riddle me this: you went to Forum Fair 303 Mall,
Yes,
the arcade,
yeah.
the big
Forum
one with the Mario
303.
go
Yeah,
around.
totally.
They have pinball.
I don't remember it.
I don't think they did. I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. I think it was my brother, and it was like, the arcade, he said the arcade I went to didn't have pinball. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think it did.
How about you?
So going at putt-putt, because that's the
And that's
arcade
not
I
my
go to all
answer,
the
by
time.
the way.
That's your answer. You only get 1 minute.
You know,
Went over time.
I don't remember some of the putt-putts having pinball machines. I just remember the one in Hearst having pinball machines.
How many did they have?
I think they probably had about 8 or 9. If I think about it, they're kind of like spaced out. Which they had one that I think every arcade should have. They don't have it here.
I worked, a little history, I worked at the Chuck E. Cheese on Fielder Road in the 90s, and also worked at the Tilt in another defunct mall right off of 360. It was Six Flags Mall.
Six Flags Mall,
Flags
yeah.
Mall.
And then our Tilt, we had a Sega Star Wars Trilogy pinball, and that I don't remember there being another pinball there. I think we just had the one.
Yeah.
And in my Chuck E. Cheese, we had a Data East Back to the Future, and I don't remember who made the generic football back then, but you could get different translites, and obviously we had the Cowboys translite. But we had 2 pinball machines in Chuck E. Cheese, and I believe just 1 pinball machine in our in Tilt. The Tilt in Northeast Mall, I don't remember. Only pinball machine I remember there is another Sega pinball machine. I guess they had a run of games at that time, but they had a Twister pinball machine for the movie Twister, and I believe they only had 4 pinball machines. I just think it's hard to register how many pinball machines some place had in the early 80s, because there wasn't as many arcade machines, and pinball had been around for quite a long time. But by the 90s, when our memories are really taking place, are we just remembering pinballs being pretty much phased out? Because like by year 2000, I don't even think hardly anybody was making pinball.
No, I think that the reason, again, this is me pulling something out of the air here.
Yeah, totally.
But where I saw most pinball machines were in bars.
Totally, yeah.
So,
bars had the good
I
pinball.
saw that they always had pinball machines in bars.
You know,
and I'm not saying I was old enough to go to
You were
bars.
frequenting bars when you were
But
12, son.
My
It
dad
is.
actually owned a bar, and my mom worked on it, and they serviced some other stuff with pool tables. So I'd go with them, and I would see pinball machines when they go to different bars.
I will leave it in the description, but there's a movie called Pinball, which came out like a year ago, which is all about how pinballs used to be classified in a lot of states as gambling machines, and therefore didn't make it into arcades. So I'll link that in the description.
Maybe that has something to do with it too.
But maybe that had something to do with it. Is like, people still had that connotation of a pinball machine or
It's
something.
a little less seedy.
Yeah.
And this may also be very regional too. It may be up north there were a ton of pinball and no arcades. We're speaking from a very small part of the world. It's big to us because it's Texas.
But my answer to your question is today in a modern
Yeah.
arcade, I think you have to have pinball, and I think you got to have at least 7 or 8 of them.
I think the difference, though, and why maybe some of them were put in, pinball was very simple back at the beginning.
Boy,
You
man.
hit a ball and it hits a target and bounces back, and they've gotten very complex. They've got
Oh, yeah.
movies playing
They're
in the background.
giant puzzle
But
machines.
when I saw Medieval Madness for the
Oh
first time,
yeah, great pinball machine.
that hooked
I wish
me
they'd
on-
remake it. Chicago Gaming remake that.
They are actually remaking it. I saw
No,
they're
they
gonna-
say they
they're
are.
gonna- Yeah,
It's
so
gonna come
let's see
out
what they come out. But definitely that changed everything for pinball, and that actually got me interested in more pinball machines.
I
and
like
playing
that.
more.
I mean, hell, you can collapse a building and Godzilla in that pinball machine. So, how many pinball machines should an arcade have, Roman?
You know, I think they should have a good variety of 10 to 12 if they're really going to it, at least on the floor. A nice row of it where people can get together, watch. And
Agreed.
I actually like watching people play pinball. You know, arcade games, video arcade games I like playing. Pinball, I like watching people play because it's truly a skill game.
I love pinball. I'm definitely more of a video game guy than I am a pinball guy, but I absolutely love it, and it was a lot of fun. The you know, being an operator, it's very expensive, right? It's expensive to maintain, and it's very expensive to get into the pinball game. And especially us here, we try to at least on the Sterns, we try to be on that mid-level where you're not really missing any features in the game, but we don't necessarily need the fancy art package that an LE Stern would have. That doesn't really make a lot of sense on the floor. But most operators operate a Pro, which would be the base model car, right? It's not the one with the heated seats necessarily. So we kind of operate that middle ground just because I don't like to miss any gameplay personally, and I don't for my clientele either. I'm willing to pay just a little bit more for that extra ramp or, you know, more 3D toys on the play field.
I don't know if a lot of our listeners realize this, but like a row of 10 Stern pens is an easy $100,000 plus.
Yeah, $100,000.
They're not cheap.
A premium Stern pinball right now is $9,500. Yep. And to see people beat on them the way they do, you're just like, oh, Jesus. You just make you cry a little bit. But it's expensive. So if you're an arcade, you're upstart, right? And you've got to get in the game, and you've bought all these retro games that you're working on, but you need to get some pinball on the floor. And maybe you mix in some older units that are $2,500 to $5,000. But when you start mixing in those Sterns, so we started a little small with our pinball lineup. We started with 4. And what I found out very quickly is those 4 get the heck played out of them. I mean, they're just getting roughed up. It's just too little of amount of pinball for how many people are going to play it, especially if you have your arcade on a unlimited play platform where you just pay one price and you can play as much as you want. They're coming in, they're going to beat up that pinball. And so 4 is too little. You got to have more than that. Right. Then you get to the other side of the equation. So say 10 would be on that. To me, that's almost the perfect. I say 8, 9, 10. That kind of, it spreads out the beating enough between the 10. But I think if you get past that, you start getting to like having too many cats. Like the cat box always is going to need to be emptied because you have too many cats in the house. So basically, when you have 20 pinball machines, the chances of problems are going to be very high, and you're going to almost dedicate a tech to constantly clean them. I never knew how dirty pinball machines got. But in the last 4 years, how many times I've cleaned those play fields and waxed those play fields and replaced the bands and cleaned those and just clean the balls, but new balls. And have you ever had to think about, you have to add new balls to a pinball machine, you know, because they get all dented up and scratched up?
I will say that I feel like the pinball machines at the Electric Starship are maintained better than anywhere I've ever
seen.
Nice.
And Mike Murray's very nice.
You know, I will tell you though, that when you're walking down the hallway to get here, that's the first thing you see when you walk in.
Big row of pins.
And there's a row of people right there next to them. Playing them. It's always busy. So it's expected for it to come in and have the pinball and see that. It just attracts that and hear that sound when you walk in.
I love that too. The sound of pinball is fantastic. So that brings us to genres of games. So yeah, in my eyes, pinball is one of the highest played sections of the arcade. There's games that are on the floor that are fantastic games, and I don't see anybody playing them sometimes. So that's me personally. We're talking about a wide net. I think you are trying. You do want to put some modern games in to mix in with those older games.
Well, I mean, let's think about it. Could you open an arcade that only had Pac-Man and Galaga? I mean, like we said earlier.
I mean, you can open anything.
Those are must-haves, right? Can't open an arcade without those.
You can't open one without them, but if you want to... So I'm going to go to... this is a little rule I apply, and I don't know, it's this top secret rule here. I'm just going to let it out. So I feel like the vintage, beautiful, fantastic games from the golden era of arcades in the 80s, the early 80s, and into the 90s with fighting games, especially resurrecting that arcade scene. I think those are must-haves to get people in the door, right? But if you want to keep people playing in the door, I think you had to have some...
And get them to come back.
Well, we're going to get to that. I think if you want to keep them there, once they're there, and have them have fun, because a lot of these old games will kind of squat you out pretty quick, right? You play Tempest, you might be done in 30 seconds.
Yep.
You play Spy Hunter, you may never even know that there's a gas pedal to push. You may never get the car going, or you may not put it in low gear.
And why is that, Mike?
Why is what?
Why are those games like that?
I think they were trying to make money back then,
they're
man.
quarter eaters.
You're supposed to eat your money up, your quarters, right? That's why the first character in Mortal Kombat you play, Mortal Kombat 2, you can wipe them out. And then the second guy blows you smooth out of there. It's like, well, that was a really quick learning curve. I had to master this thing in one level. So, yeah, they're not really designed to keep you playing like that. But a good modern game, with those graphics that are a little closer to what they're used to, and anything that's a multiplayer, like a 4-player Pac-Man Battle Royale, these are games that are going to keep them there, and they're going to remember and have fun. But the good mix is what brings them back.
Absolutely.
I think so too. So you have to realize there's going to be different people coming in. If everybody was only playing one game, you would have that one game duplicated over everything, right? Or you'd have your recorder up on the screen waiting for your time next. But having that separation, having that difference, having that one arcade game that when that one person comes in, they want to play, you'll have people in here more times looking at everything as a whole, not just as a whole.
Variety is the spice of life. So you want to have a lot of variety in the arcade. At least that's what we go by. And we don't know everything, but I love it. And the patrons, like this young man to my right here, he seems to really like that too. So
yeah,
whatever Roman likes is what we do here. He's the secret sauce.
I agree with like everything that's been said to this point, but you've left out one thing.
What?
Crane and claw machine.
Crane and claw. Redemption.
Redemption.
What do you think about Redemption, Mike?
It depends. I think if we're talking about redemption as in I'm going to play for a whole bunch of tickets and then I'm going to take those or points or whatever it is these days, right? And then I'm going to take it back and redeem it for prizes. I hate that. I hated it then. I hate it now. I hated it when I was a kid, and I hate it now.
It's a segue to my shirt. Mechanical Rat, Pizza, and Child Casino.
There you go, Child Casino. Yeah. I do like claw machines if it's just that one machine, I'm going to win a prize right there, and I'm done. But if I have to go take tickets back to somewhere and redeem them, I'm out.
So what if the world disagrees with you?
They might, and that's okay. You can leave it in the comments and tell me.
Roman, do you have grandchildren?
I do. So redemption is a very big. I have a very big view on this.
Really tapped into something here.
I guess the question I would have, and by all means, I'm not saying this, but I am. But when you go to a casino and you put money in there, you pull the lever and you're hoping you win something.
Right.
I feel the same thing with redemption. It's a
Child Casino.
It's a Child Casino, right? I mean, we've established that. So I think that if you're going for a shop that has a lot of redemption, you know what you're walking into, and that's your goal is to play those, and you're going to have fun with that. If you're going to have an arcade that has a separate section with the tickets, I'm not a fan of that because the prize is set there, and it's just not feasible for those big prizes. I think the prize points aren't marketed correctly for children.
That's true.
Now you're getting it towards adults playing that.
Right.
Well, so, I was at an arcade. Can we call it an arcade? It's a redemption center. I was at one of these facilities.
Child Casino, go.
Child Casino. I was at one of these child casinos just in the last probably 3 or 4 months, and they had a Xbox up top, and it was 150,000 tickets. And I did the math, and it was going to be something like $1,200 of
You're
plays.
just not very good at these games.
for me to win an Xbox. I'm like, well, I could just go down to the store and buy the Xbox for like
That's not nearly as much fun.
All I could say is that the Carnival Cruise Line owes me about $200 for the credits from redemption.
If you were on Carnival, you didn't pay near enough for all the food you ate. I promise you that. Well, I remember a place called Nickel Mania. Did anybody go to a Nickel Mania?
I have not, but I know what it is.
It was fantastic. So basically the concept was they hadn't figured out that the one price pay thing that we've all figured out now in the modern day just yet. But they said, what if we knock all these games that people used to play down to a nickel instead of a quarter? Will people still play them? The answer was yes. So you get a big old roll of nickels for $20 or whatever. What is a roll of nickels? $5. Wow. Yeah. Well, I can't do math, folks. Come make change with me here at the Electric Starship Arcade. Anyway, you get a roll of nickels. You get 4 rolls then for $20. Look at that. I can't do a little math. But I would play the redemption machines like crazy when it was only a nickel. And I remember winning a big Cat in the Hat there. And I probably paid $25 for that 30-cent hat, you know. So I think the world does disagree with us, at least from a money-making standpoint, because everything seems to have been a little bit more centered around redemption. You go to a Dave & Buster's, the video game is not the most common thing you see there.
Are they doing that because that's what the customer wants, or that's because how they
that's how they make money?
Right.
Well,
right.
The kids are being, I believe, directed to want that because they don't know any different. And so that's going to make money. So the kids do seem happy. I don't know about the parents so much, but we've seemed to be, as a society, directed towards spending more money anyway. And it's just, that's the way it is. So I do love the fact that retro arcades have sprung up, because it does give the option for you to introduce these old games to your kids and maybe show them that there is something else besides just a casino.
Well, let me give you, so I've had this kind of ever since we started this conversation, I've had this in the back of my head, but my daughter-in-law, her father asked me when we started the process of opening the new Time Rift in Bedford, he's like, there's a pizza place on the same facility as you, and they have arcades in there. And he goes, how in the heck do you think you as a mom and pop place are going to compete with this big chain?
We can't. Close the doors now.
So my answer was this. It was, well, you're going to pay $12 to get in my door, and you can play from the time we open till the time we close on that $12. Or you can go to this pizza place, and it's $3.50 per play, and you can play basically 3 times.
Absolutely. When
That's the difference.
The funny thing is that pizza place, I believe you can have a whole buffet for less than you can play one of those games.
Right.
A whole buffet of pizza. So,
right.
Anyway, that's hilarious. So we've crossed over into the Family Entertainment Center, the FEC. Yeah. And I broke these down into 2 categories, basically. One of them being kid-centric, and one of them being a true mega. I call it a mega because you can do anything you want at this place. It's where dreams come true, apparently. Maybe not so much on the retro side of things, but definitely on the giant, modern amusement, coin-operated or card-operated amusement machine. So we'll talk about the kid-centric ones first. Obviously, you go back to the days of Showbiz Pizza and Chuck E. Cheese as we remember it. And man, those places were fantastic because they did have a good mix of video games, and you could get tickets back then. It wasn't all on the card, which there is something to dropping a token or exchanging coins for a token and then getting tickets and then having a pile of tickets and you count them, or someone's weighing them. Remember they weighed tickets?
My thing was you could take your giant pile of tickets, and they had this machine that you could feed them in.
That was a little later. Ticket muncher. Yeah, that was great.
I actually saw one time someone winning, and they were feeding it at the same time.
Ooh, they were just close enough. And there's a long string from across the floor. That is amazing. I used to love that. The only thing I hated about the ticket munch machine was when you had half a ticket and you're trying to fit it in its mouth. Yeah. Just take it. You're cramming, just trying to get that other half ticket in there.
You know, one of the old school tricks where when you got tickets, you pulled slowly to
the skee ball lane.
Tickets out of that.
Just eke a few more before exactly. It broke, the perforation broke between the tickets. Yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah, those were the old school ones, and those were a lot of fun, but there was a mix of video games there that was eating up the tokens, and that's not the way they look now inside. Most of them are redemption. There are some video games, and they'll usually they play it pretty safe with the video games because they're going to give you the rail shooter, which is for those of you that are a little lacking on arcade definition, is where it's directing you where to go and you have no choice. You're on a rail, just like if you were on a train, and then you just shoot what comes along on the side of the train, basically. And then they'll stick with racing games as well, especially tune related, like a Nicktoons Racing or something at Cars, I think, is a current Chuck E. Cheese racing game. So they're a little different now, and they're definitely not dark and seedy and what I would consider very fun. But you know, to each their own. And I'm sure kids still like going to Chuck E. Cheese, just like it's a mini amusement place. So, so kid-centric. GameWorks was a big arcade back in the day. I don't know that I would call it kid-centric though. They were almost aiming for the Gen X teen at that point.
Yeah, I think I remember going there, and that was the first arcade I went to that you had to be 18 or over to get in.
Oh, really?
A certain time. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I
I
had
didn't
never
know
been
that.
into another one that was a certain age to get in at that point in my life.
That was a cool place.
It was. And
Good job, Sega. That was awesome.
Yep. But I think they had they had like the 2- and 3-story games.
Oh, my
balloon
God.
Game, remember that?
Yeah, that balloon game, you rode it. It was like a ride. I remember they had wave racers, and they had a giant wave made out of, I don't know, resin or something. I don't know. The giant plaster wave above your head was really, really cool.
And
all the race cars lined up.
Yeah, the Daytona USA. That was the most amazing racing game.
Oh, it was beautiful.
When it was 8 cars, and it was a full-size car that you got into.
That was so cool.
Who is it that has the crane machine that you bolt the kid to? I
don't know. I wish I saw that.
I saw it outside of an arcade, but I saw that in the mall where
there is somebody round one or somebody around here has a machine. That
the kid is the crane.
The kid is the crane.
And he doesn't pick up anything either. And you're like, what's wrong with this thing? I'm going to return that crane, kid. It's ridiculous. And then we get into the mega, right? So now we're in the Dave & Buster's main event. Round 1, I would consider a mega.
You know, I would probably go to GameWorks as a mega because it was 2-story.
Yeah.
And if it would have been all on one, it probably would have been about the same size as one of those, to be honest with you. It was big.
I agree with you from a size standpoint, but from a option standpoint, you still were basically playing games either for tickets or you're playing arcade machines. And a lot of them were big arcade machines. It was kind of the introduction of the giant arcade. Because if you go to a Dave & Buster's or a main event, the arcades, some of them are 2 stories tall, and it's just a ball drop game or something like that, a giant ball drop. But what they didn't have, unless I'm wrong, and I could be, is all the different options of other stuff like bowling and karaoke and, you know, go-karts or something, you know.
That's a valid point. They did have like billiards and stuff like bar stuff
right,
upstairs, but really nothing like you said. And yeah, that's a whole other level.
Well,
like
you know, somebody who's kind of doing that is Alley Cats.
Oh yeah, Alley Cats is a. I would say Alley Cats is a mega. I mean, a big one that has an actual. It was the putt-putt,
right?
You know, and then it has bowling and it has
go-karts.
I mean, that might be the mega of
they have
megas.
Amusement rides outside.
See, I never think they do have amusement.
Yeah,
that's a big place when you think of it. Batting cages.
Yep, batting cages.
Yeah. But putt-putts had batting cages back in the day. It was pretty fun. So, yeah, obviously the mini golf, right? Do you consider Alley Cats bigger than Dave & Buster's a main event, or is it just those companies are so much bigger?
That's a good question. I mean, from a size of the actual facility, I think Alley Cats is bigger than.
It's got to be bigger.
Yeah.
When you're looking at square footage of the whole property,
I think the square footage.
What makes an arcade, folks? We're talking about square footage at this point. So anyway, what do you think of those places?
So I think that, you know, for me personally, I think they've kind of lost the charm of the arcade.
The word charm.
They've, you know, when I go to an arcade, I want to go play arcade games and video games.
Absolutely.
I don't want to go play redemption games. You know, that's me personally.
Right.
So when you start going to these bigger places, then you start losing that deal. And now you have round 1 that has a very good size arcade, and they have the bowling. So that's more a little bit on.
But they don't have any classics.
But they don't, not anymore. And as a matter of fact, I think it's even changed over the last maybe like 6 or 7 years. So I used to take my employees to round 1 for employee parties every year, and we would go over there. They had like candy cabs in there.
Absolutely.
And
some Japanese sit down.
And now I went over there last year, and a lot of those are gone now, and they've put more redemption, and there's more like I guess like Vulix types.
Okay. So Mike and I did a round 1 kind of tour about probably close to 2 years ago.
Right.
And then we did another one about 10 months after that. And the thing we noticed was that a huge portion of games were gone and had been replaced by crane machines.
Like the Japanese style, like
Yep.
Sega UFO style crane machines, because that's what's big. And that's a Japanese company, right? Am I wrong on that? I hope not.
No, you're not.
Sure.
Okay.
That's right.
So that's what's big in Japan. And I think that culture has crossed over the ocean. You know, I believe that crane machines are, you know, arcade purists probably listening to this particular podcast is not going to think that, but, you know, perception is reality. And my perception is you wouldn't double your cranes
if that's not where they were
if that's where they weren't making money.
Right.
Exactly. So, so are retro arcades trying to make money? Or are we ignoring are we ignoring the cranes and the redemption? or we just love the nostalgia. I personally love it. I mean, as long as I make enough money to pay the bills, I love the nostalgia.
But I think it goes back to that same question. Are you trying to open an arcade or are you going to open a redemption center? You know, that's where...
Is it a child casino?
Yeah.
Or is it a place where you can play Robotron 2084?
Right. Because I think it's two different things you're looking for. If someone says, "Hey, I want to go to the arcade," they come here.
I'm gonna
play some redemption games. I want to go.
I'm gonna leave you with a thought.
Okay.
Every time that I go ask on this topic, every time I go ask one of my friends what their favorite arcade is, they always pick an arcade that is kind of a mix of classic, you know, the retro, the modern, and the pinball, and all of that mixed together, kind of like the Electric Starship. Maybe Cidercade, right? I never, ever hear them say, "Oh, Round One's my favorite arcade." I never hear anyone say, "Oh, Main Event's my favorite arcade."
Right.
Why is that?
Because it's a lot cheaper, Mike. I'm just kidding.
I think that's part of it. I think that matters, but I don't think that's it.
Right.
What do you think it is?
This place has a vibe
Absolutely.
that you cannot get at a Main Event. This
The
does not
vibe is
exist at a Main
amazing.
Event. I'm sorry. I love Main Event. I go there all the time.
I love it too.
But it's not the same.
I love it too. Yeah, there's a difference in going to the Applebee's bar and going to your favorite neighborhood bar like
Absolutely.
Cheers, right?
Absolutely.
And if you build an environment like Cheers where everyone knows your name and you make friends and all of a sudden you're hanging out and you're going to movies together, I don't think those big places create that environment. It's a place you go with your friends.
I'm going to say
I might meet people here and go to Main Event.
Right. I'm going to say this, and I don't mean this derogatory towards Main Event or any of those companies at all, but they are the McDonald's of the arcade world.
It's just a little bit of the soul.
You know, I think that a big thing for me, when I come in here and I walk into this building, I know people.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking about just the people who work here, but other customers that come in.
Yeah.
Hey, what's
the
up,
regulars?
What's up? How you doing? How's it going? And you won't get that when you go to some of the other places. Now, I'm not saying no one else has that, but you won't see that at Main Event. I've never walked into Main Event and said, "Hey, I know some of these people that are here." I've never done that.
And if I was to challenge anybody opening a retro style arcade or an arcade with a bar, I would say that would be the environment that you want, that culture that you want to build in your employees and with your regulars, is you want to have something where these people are thinking about getting you a Christmas present.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're going to maybe know when your birthday is and celebrate it even though you're working at your own place. Where am I going to take you for your birthday? Oh, to work. Sweet. All right. Well, I do love it here. So
I have met so many friends at this place.
Right.
Like so many people that I know on a first name basis. You're never going to get that experience at one of those large venues like that.
It would almost seem weird.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day when we walked into an arcade and someone was playing a fighting game, you rolled up on them and stuck a coin in and started playing with them. Here, I have people that might come up and say, "Hey, can you tell them to stop playing that game because I want to play it now?" And that's a very different experience. It's a different world we live in.
It is.
It doesn't make
has changed.
It doesn't make it right or wrong, but I certainly do pine for the days where you could make a friend just by whipping their ass at Mortal Kombat. So
I will tell you though that one of the things that I saw, this has actually just happened just a couple of days ago. I was here. There was a party. Mike was working behind the desk. And
The bar, you mean?
Bar.
Yeah.
Thank you.
we call it a desk.
The desk.
Where it works.
Look at the desk.
Well, I just
working
meant
behind
not
the
his
bar.
desk in the
Bar, desk. I'm drinking at both places. So it doesn't
This
matter.
young kid decided to come up here and he wanted to make sure he told Mike about how he was playing and he got the top score on Mario Kart and he wanted to let him know what was going on. And it wasn't like he was a little kid. This was like a 6th, 7th grader. And that's something you don't see out of these other places where they're talking with the owner and letting them know, "Hey man, I did really good over here. This is great."
I love that, by the way.
And then me, but personally, I'm on Street Fighter 3, and then Mike just comes and whoops my ass. So obviously,
Well,
that's not entirely true.
any fighting game
These guys have taught me many a lesson.
Mike whips my ass.
These guys have taught me many a lesson on many a fighting game here. So I've been spanked.
I beat him on
royally.
Mario Kart this morning. Though.
He did twice. What are you gonna do? Lose a lot. Everyone wants to beat the owner at an arcade. If you're ever planning on owning one of these, get ready because you're going to get spanked a lot. So, let's close here. I think that we have defined what an arcade is, or we've at least created enough argument to where we can have a very interesting comment section on anything that we put this video or podcast on. So I really appreciate you guys, man. Some fantastic feedback and opinions, and I love the memories. Obviously, that's why we want to talk about this stuff, folks, is we want to live in those good old days, which we do here all the time, and we will at Time Rift when that opens. And anyway, any closing thoughts?
No, I'll just make one comment on the podcast itself, and that is any of you guys who are out there listening to us on Spotify or some of those platforms that you've traditionally thought of as audio only, this podcast will be available on any platform that supports a video version as well, so you can see us talking and things like that. So
if you want to look at our grizzled faces, certainly you can on one of these platforms. How about you, Roman?
I would say, for everyone out there that's in the area, and if you didn't know the Starship existed over here, come by, stop by, play some games.
Altum City, Texas. Yep, it's close to everywhere.
Yeah.
So you'll have a good time. Lots of old games, lots of new games, lots of everything.
And I would even say that we're the kind of people that we'd love it if you come up and greeted us and said hi. We'd love talking to you.
Yep.
And I'll leave you with this, folks. If there's anything that you want us to talk about, arcade related, obviously I'm not into politics or anything. Anything you want us to talk about arcade related, please, mention in the comments. We are going to go through those comments and definitely figure out what you guys want to hear, because that's honestly, there's not a lot of options as far as arcade talk goes, and I think your opinions is the ones that matter the most about what you want to hear.
Yeah. So we're hoping to release every 2 weeks,
couple weeks. And that'd be great.
If you have a topic, drop it in the comments and we'll add it to our list if we think it's one that we can make into something more than about 10 minutes long.
And if you need arcade parts and everything, please visit thegeekpub.com. They will have T-molding and buttons and all kinds of sorted ways to build out your cocktail or upright arcade machines. And if you're in the local area, please come by and see us. And any arcade, support any of the arcades in DFW area.
Absolutely.
There's some great arcades out there, and look at our YouTube channel and you'll see me tour them all. I love them all. So anyway, so we're signing off.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.